Welcome to Real Generation Gap. I'm Rudy Ruiz.
I'm Fred Satilli.
And today we're going to be discussing a 1992 straight-to-television movie. This is called An American Story. So this follows the true little-known history of the Battle of Athens, Tennessee in the late 40s, post-World War II. I'm just going to throw this to you because I know you, I think, have a little more knowledge on the actual history of this. I'm just going off the movie, so how about you tell us about the plot of this one?
Yeah, this is a true story. The movie is a simplification of the story. In reality, it was a much larger event. There were thousands of people involved. This is shown in a small town, and you see a couple of dozen cars and guys with rifles. But in reality, it's hard to imagine now. But this little place, Athens, Tennessee, 3,000 servicemen came home from the war. 3,000 in that county. So they came there. The town was run by really corrupt politics. The sheriff was really bad. The legislators were really bad. They were shaking everybody down. These soldiers that came back, they were pulled over indiscriminately and charged with drunken driving, and just money was taken from them. And there was all kinds of beatings. It was horrific. And they said, we got to do something about this. And so one of them said, well, I'll run for the office and we'll get rid of this guy. We'll vote him out. But they weren't ready for election fraud. The election fraud was so bad. We have unbelievable election fraud now, but it's like digital. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that they don't show in the movie that happened in real life was one of the poll watchers, he wanted to see the ballot box before it was started to make sure that it was empty, that it didn't already have 1,000 ballots in it. It's like, I want to see that box is empty. When it came time to vote, all these soldiers, they had the Veterans Party. They made their own party. So right off the bat, you had thousands of guys that just immediately showed up and congested. The line went 1,000 people deep. And it was all for one thing. And in the final analysis, it was a 3-1 victory for the guy who beat out the incumbent who was doing all this horrible stuff. And he had to actually, I'm getting way ahead of the story, but he had to actually run for his life because they tried to capture the ballot box. And Cantrell, he hired 200 deputies to surround the ballot box and take it out of the, out of the place where the ballots were being cast and take it to the jail where they secured it because they wanted to be the ones to count the vote, right? Russian style, right? It only matters who counts the votes. And of course they weren't having that. And they set siege to the place. And in the movie, it's a cute little siege. But in real life, man, they surrounded this. These guys were soldiers. They were real gunners.
Yeah.
They knew how to blow up stuff and how to strategic everything. And they literally, the way Cantrell escaped in real life, in the movie, they say he jumped out the back window and ran, but there were wounded inside the building. They said, we need an ambulance for the wounded. Instead of putting the wounded in, they put Cantrell and the sheriff in, and they escaped. They realized these people were going to capture them.
Yeah.
So we should talk about the movie. I always just call it the Battle of Athens. I wasn't really aware that it was an American story.
Yeah, it made it a little tough for me to find some information on it because that's what I kept typing in. But yeah, An American Story, 1992, Hallmark Channel film, but nominated for 2 Emmys. So don't be thrown off by that, everybody.
Yeah, it's an A-quality movie.
Yeah, and it is available on YouTube. I'll put the link in the description so that everybody can go ahead and watch it.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, it's up there. So it's well worth checking out. I had no idea of this story, and I thought it was really well done, really well made. I love the cast. I think that Tom Sizemore really steals the show. And this is, he's just so good. And everybody in it is good, but he just has an extra little level to him. And it's like, all right, well, yeah, that's why he would later be in bigger movies than a lot of these other folks,
Right.
It's like you can see the talent there.
The lady characters, they were so in character for the time. They really did a good job of not modernizing it.
Yeah.
You know, But one of the modernizing features that I especially liked in the movie that I don't know that it happened in real life was there was a Mexican family. At that time, I was from New Jersey. We had Puerto Ricans. Mexico was an exotic foreign land south of the border, with the sombrero. And, it wasn't like now where these people are your friends and neighbors and, co-workers and all that. And so this guy, the government was prejudiced against him and his family, but he came through in the end and he said, this is my town too, and this is where I'm from, and I'm going to fight this fight. And it was kind of a cool addition to the movie that was put into the script. And it might have happened in real life, but I don't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's many
a minority in 46
throughout.
Is not like a minority now.
Yeah.
That guy would have really been,
Juan Medina. And he talks about when he gets home too, I think he's talking to his father about how, now he has great camaraderie. He's like brothers with people who would never have given him the time of day before, but going through the war experience, they're all like really tight now.
That was the way my natural father went to Korea, and he had no prejudice against anybody because he fought with every race. He had every, and he was an Italian, and at that time the Italians were looked down upon, so he had that kind of camaraderie that came first. Oh, these guys were loyal to each other. They were really loyal to each other, and when the town was prejudiced against him, the soldiers all went like, wait a minute, this guy saved my life. This guy risked his life. This guy did the impossible. He did acts of bravery. And they're like, yeah, but he's just a Mexican. And it was like, oh, don't you ever say that again. Sometimes you're more offended than the person who's being offended. I know working in Harley Davidson, I had a customer once say, I don't want that Mexican working on my bike. And this guy was a fantastic master mechanic. Like to have him work on your bike, it's like almost like an honor. Like this guy's going to actually help you dopey jackass, And he was like, yeah. I said, wait a minute. What did you say? And meanwhile, the mechanic himself wouldn't have been that offended. He'd been like, what a jerk. But I was offended. I was like, you say that again, you and me are going out in the back. You understand that? And I was like, take it easy, Fred. It's like, I'm not having that. I love that guy. Yeah. It's like, all right. We'll just pick somebody else. It was like, yeah, and it won't be somebody as good as what you would have had. Right. So there. So it's funny how he wasn't saying anything about me, but I didn't like him. It was Dave Rivera. The fact that he had something prejudiced against, it was like a mind blower. It hurt me, So it was the same thing for these guys. And they like lump you into it because they think you're going to go along with it, right? So it's also that aspect because it's that's what you think of my character, No, I really like the inclusion, like the whole Juan Medina storyline and everything. I really liked him trying to get the job and, oh, well, you don't have the experience. And he's like, well, it said no experience. I can learn. I've learned all these things in battle. And even when he tries to get a job for his friend George's father, George Meade, the one that would eventually run for the mayor. And his father is very straightforward.
I'd like to help him out, but what could he do here?
Well, I was thinking maybe file clerk.
Tom Cantrell's nephew is our file clerk.
You mean the kid that sits around all day?
You're a good lawyer, George. But since when did you get so friendly with the Mexicans?
Dad, I trust my life with this man. We'd be lucky to have him.
Don't be naive, George. He doesn't have the right qualifications. You understand what I'm saying?
There's that sad moment, but it's very powerful when he's at the door and, kind of like in your story, George is more offended by it than he is because he's used to it. Juan Medina knows the score. Right. But he looks at his friend George and he says,
you ever miss the war, George? The truth? A little bit, yeah. Me too.
And it's just such a shame. And, we see a lot of them have these issues they're dealing with. Tom Sizemore has
PTSD.
some kind of neurological problem. So he's got to learn to walk again. He's like stuttering or just, losing his train of thought and all that. And it's really, man, I hate to see these people get mistreated in their hometown after everything they've gone through and everything they've done. And even that's just like the personal interactions, like not even talking yet about like the major corruption of the town and taxing them and doing all this nonsense, which, triggers Tom Sizemore to be like, hey, we got to fight against this. This isn't right. We stood up to the Nazis. Why are we going to come home and let these guys, run our lives like this? And yeah, it's a real shame. And they do a really good job, I think, portraying that. And it makes it sometimes a little, not hard to watch, but it's tough and it sucks. Like you hate to see that. And
this movie penetrates.
Yeah.
It gets you in the heart. And
it really makes me think of, I feel like I've referenced this several times, but that ending monologue scene in First Blood when, John Rambo is like, I used to be in charge of $1 million equipment. I could drive a tank. Back here, I can't even get a job washing cars. Yeah. He's like, over there, we had a code of honor. You watch my back, I watch yours. Over here, there's nothing.
For me, civilian life is nothing. In the field, we had a code of honor. You watch my back, I watch yours. Back here, there's nothing.
Don't end it like this.
Back there, I could fly a gunship. I could drive a tank. I was in charge of $1 million equipment. Back here, I can't even hold a job. Fucking cars!
It's like that same exact kind of story of, Juan Medina's out here doing all this crazy stuff in battle, but now I come here, you won't even get me a desk job, and along with these other guys. And even the stuff they got to deal with, like George Meade and dealing with his wife and Tom Sizemore. And I think
his problem with his wife had the ambition. And you got to remember, this is the South, right? So they had that Southern prejudice. They had the Southern corruption. It's different than the Northern corruption, you know? And man, they portrayed that really well. Now, another character that also had a heavy line, and my favorite line of the whole movie actually is, there was a woman who's trying to rehabilitate these soldiers who had these, emotional problems and these adjustment problems. Back then, they called it shell shock.
Right.
They didn't have PTSD yet. They were like, yeah, he's a little bit off, and he would only be right in combat. Like he needed combat to justify his existence, right? Came home and there was nothing going on. And all of a sudden, like, what should I wear to the picnic was important. I don't care. How could I possibly care about that, right? So they get to the point where they're gonna begin to raise arms. And the woman who's trying to rehabilitate these soldiers and everything, she says,
why does it always have to come down to a war?
You want to know why, Hope? Because some people can't be reasoned with.
And he says my favorite line in the movie, because there are some people that you just can't reason with. And I was like,
yeah,
right with both fists. You know what I mean? Like, and we have that now. This is so relevant to now.
Yeah.
There are people that just, their mind is closed. They have their heels dug in. They're in the stupidest position on earth, but they want to hold that position. And one of the big problems with America today is we allow them to hold that position, right? Like men and women sports. It's just no. It's just no. There's no argument. There's no discussion. It's ludicrous. It's the first person that thought of it should have been smacked in the face, I mean, and then the fact that there's people who they want to somehow make some weird circuitous argument where in this one particular unique case, there's somebody who, no, it's just no, right? You want to, men's sports, women's sports, if you want to have somebody that's not a man or woman, then they could have their own category, but don't take it away from the women and don't take it away from the men. So, and boy, it's just it's absurd. And this is why we don't want an armed conflict. My churches vote them out, right? And that's what we want to do, But man, there are some people that just can't be reasoned with. The people that they commit a crime, they just stand right there and deny it, holding a smoking gun in their hand. This isn't my gun. I
love that line too. Some people can't be reasoned with. And then she says, is it him or you? And man, I get where she's coming from to an extent, but it's like he's given them every opportunity. Like there's clearly a right and wrong here,
right?
And he said it best. Like, and it's not like these vets want to go back to war. They were avoiding that. That's the last thing they want to do.
They just came home.
Yeah, it took one of their own getting shot, to finally like, all right, this is what we have to do now. They can't be shooting our people, over the ballot box. Good Lord. And that's the thing that really gets me too. Like, I can't imagine like surviving some atrocities like a world war and then coming home and then just getting whacked in your hometown over something like that.
I survived two years of, combat in France, got machine guns and everything. And some dopey sheriff deputy guy is going to trigger happy. Oh my God.
Yeah. It's just crazy.
Man. It's impossible to take. It's, I know it's just a movie, but it's not just a movie. And this is why I recommended this. This is why I wanted Rudy to watch it, and this is why I want you all to watch this, because man, oh man, peaceful solutions, reason, logic, rational accounting. It's gotta be, we have to return to it. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm all of a sudden I'm like in exit mode here, but are there points you wanted to make that I
mean, just from the narrative, filmmaking side of it, I think they do a good job with the subtext in certain scenes between like Cantrell and George's father.
Oh yeah, just the assumed corruption.
Yeah.
Now look
like
here, boy.
When they're golfing and he's just like, yeah, I've helped out your firm quite a bit, haven't I? Yep, you sure have. Yeah. So about your son, all that kind of stuff. And, there's another great line that I really loved where, there's a moment where in this really sad part where, Tom Sizemore's character, he's the one that has like a neurological problem.
Right.
And he's going to go for mayor. His friends are trying to back him. In the current
he shouldn't
guy,
be the one.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be the one. They got a natural politician, but he's already, because of his family, he's already in the Cantrell camp.
Yeah.
And the soldiers are pissed off. They're like, you should be the one running. You're the natural.
Yeah.
We got a guy here where sometimes he can't walk right. Sometimes he can't speak right. He's kind of like the guy from Pennsylvania. The guy had the stroke, right? He couldn't walk right. He couldn't talk right. They voted him in anyway. I'll tell you how bad this was in real life. This Cantrell was a Democrat, a Southern Democrat. And when he went in office in that county, they had 23 judges, but he reduced it to 12. Right? It had to be the guys that would do his way.
Right.
They got rid of the guys that wanted to do the right thing, and they corrupted the judiciary too. And that's another problem our country suffers from now. These overreaching judges, right? Just imagine coming home to that.
Well, and you see how deep it is too, when they keep telling George, even his father is like, you got to give to get. And in a few years,
everybody's
probably
compromised.
Yeah. You're going to end up being everything you hate probably. And it runs way deeper than you think. Like, this person's tied into so many people, and yeah, it's a very nasty business. But that scene where, Cantrell does decide, he's like, yeah, they can put up, his name was Jesse Meadows, Tom Sizemore. Like, I'm going to do a public debate with him because he's going to stumble and look like a fool, and we're just going to embarrass him. And that's going to be that way. Yep. And that's another hard moment to watch. And him, like, fumbling in front of everybody is heartbreaking. And there's a whole other aspect where they decide, or they're told, the father, this is one thing where I felt the father of George flipped like really suddenly, like he was all about it. And then one day he's like, yeah, I'm going to give you this information because he's out of control. He's my friend. We grew up together, but he needs to be stopped. And it's like, well, you weren't saying that yesterday, but whatever. It's a movie. We got to speed run it. I'll take it.
Right.
But when he tells his son, he's like, the one thing, like it's already a long shot. It's unlikely this is going to happen, but something that's going to guarantee it doesn't happen is the fact that you've got Juan Medina on the ballot. He's got to be off. People just aren't ready for that, because he's a Mexican.
Yeah, the Mexican, right.
Yeah, people aren't ready for that.
Right.
So you've got to make that decision. It's like, if you want this, you're going to have to sacrifice. And they're having that really good discussion on doing it. And again, they're all really loyal to each other, so they don't want to, but at the same time, it's like, okay, if we got to let them go for the greater good, then maybe this is the move we're going to have to make. And I love that dramatic scene because I definitely see both sides of it. And it's hard because, yeah, like I would want to be there for my friend too, especially if we got to let him go because something like that, because of some racism. But also there is the reality, the needs of the many, outweigh the needs of the few kind of thing. Like, yeah, the reality, maybe if we can position ourselves here, then we can make future change for the better. Maybe you got to pick your battles, right?
Steps.
Yeah.
Right. We're doing this in steps. We can't make the leap.
And they make that decision. And I do like that. I think it was Hope, the one that's with them. She says, if we compromise this today, what are we going to compromise tomorrow?
Because she was idealistic.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is another good point though, where I'm like, damn, like I feel really like torn on that because. But
idealism and stoicism, reality, is two different things. It's great. It's great to use your thoughts start ideally. You have the idealistic, pure thing that you want to achieve. Now, the reality is maybe you can achieve that, but not today. Yeah. You can't win all the battles in the first battle in the war, right? Except for Agincourt, right? So you've got to pace yourself, make a realistic plan. People who are idealistic don't necessarily have a winning plan. Right. They have a wonderful goal, but so yeah, she's a wonderful character that way. She's the counterpoint. Yeah. She's the ideologue. She's the one, we don't want to have any violence or shooting or anything. Well, of course we don't. But there are some people you just can't reason with. Yeah. That's so, this movie is really quite good. Yeah. No, definitely. It's timely for now, even though it was made in 92. How many years later is that? I mean, it's like 25, something like that. No,
made in 92 about a story from the 40s.
Yeah. Which means it had great cars, something I always
it sure did.
And the guns too, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want everybody to watch it. I'm really glad you did. I'm glad you reacted the way you did. We're supposed to be having a conflict, you and me. It's the real generation gap. But you know what we're learning? There is no conflict in the generations because every week it's the same story, right? Like we're both 6s, we're both 10s, we're both 2s, we're both very seldom are we far apart. And I think we're the same on this one. Yeah. Rather than a number rating, let's just call it a must watch. Yep. It's a must watch. And this is a real turn off the lights, turn off your phone. You got to tune in from the beginning because the character development on all these characters is great. Just that dynamic of the husband and wife of, where she's ambitious and she wants to do the expedient thing and he's idealistic. Man, oh man, she's like, you lose this thing, you're going to lose me. Yeah. At one point she literally says, I won't be married to a loser. Right. There's a price for everything. I was like, damn. Man. Yeah, you're going to lose me when you do this thing. And you know what? He's better off without her. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And definitely. Sometimes picking the right partner in life is a huge condition of your success. You hook up with the wrong person to begin with, man, oh man. I've seen so many people who had the alcoholic spouse or somebody like that, and they dragged the whole thing down, and just there was all that. So you really need to, as you pick your friends and your coworkers and all that kind of stuff, man, picking the right people is a big part of how you're going to end up how your life is going to fly. Yeah, definitely. Anyway, there's a lot in this movie. That's a wrap on this one, everybody. Once again, the link to the movie will be in the description, so give it a watch, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.